All right, welcome to Excellence in Analytics. I am Dawn Reeby, and I have an amazing guest here today to talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence in policing, how we can recruit and retain individuals with very special abilities that contribute so well to the law enforcement field, particularly in analytics and in the Detective Bureau. So I want to introduce Tanja, our special guest today, who is a subject matter expert in this field. Welcome, Tanja, all the way from the UK. How are you today?
I am very well, and thank you very much for having me this afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. We are in the States over here. And Tanja, where exactly are you over in UK?
I am in East Sussex in England, so that's the southeastern corner underneath London.
Isn't it wonderful? These Zooms can connect people from all over the globe and share.
Love it.
Yeah, it's quite wonderful. So Tanja had joined our team, our leadership group. So our leadership group is the 9-month program for law enforcement leaders who meet on a weekly basis. And Tanja came to our group and shared a wonderful presentation specifically for our team on neurodivergence and helping others, the leaders on our team, really understand how to maximize time and energies relative to recruitment and retaining quality folks. So, Tanja, how did you become an expert in neurodivergence?
Good question. Well, I was born neurodivergent, so that was a good start. Except that I was diagnosed as autistic age 2.5, and this is a very long time ago, in a day and age when they didn't think girls could be autistic. So I was promptly diagnosed as not autistic, and I spent the next 50 years wondering what was wrong with me before I was re-diagnosed again. And I was subsequently also diagnosed with other conditions as such as ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I like to call it attention difference happy distraction instead. It comes from a lifelong experience, both knowing you are and not knowing that you are. And when I was diagnosed the second time as autistic, I thought, I need to know everything about this. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of training. And as I was already an adult teacher and facilitator, I then started developing training around neurodivergence and a couple of other things I like doing as well. So, wonderful. And then so over time, it has really developed. My work is very much informed by research and evidence base. And I really love it. Keep bringing a different perspective to the subject.
You are, and we promote evidence-based policing, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I want to have you here today, because you have taken what once was called a disability to you, and you've turned it into an optimized ability where you coach other people who are looking to be more resilient in the field and who are looking to optimize themselves. And so what is neurodivergence? Let's start there. What is neurodivergence? And make sure I'm saying this correctly.
I know, it's actually a little bit of a tricky question. It was originally coined by a lady called Judy Singer, who mentioned it in her PhD thesis. And it really refers to the infinite variability, if you like, in our brains. It's a bit like biodiversity, but then for your brain. So in a way, the world is, if you like, divided into neurotypicals, people who are not neurodivergent, or neurodivergent people, whose brains are often literally wired a little bit differently. And so they think differently, they experience the world differently. And that has very distinct advantages as well as disadvantages. And what I find so special around neurodiversity in general, and neurodiversity refers to the concept, whereas neurodivergence or neurodivergent refers to the individual. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it has occurred throughout history. It occurs in all continents, all cultures, races, religions.
Mm-hmm.
But what is quite interesting is that it's not always recognized for what it is. So it can be that somebody comes from a culture where they do not accept or recognize that, for instance, dyslexia exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so people can really struggle then because there is absolutely no help or support for them. And when they achieve things, that is because they have worked incredibly hard
Mm-hmm.
to overcome the disadvantages of dyslexia. And that's often by using the strengths of dyslexia. So I always fully admire people who
Yes,
have done. But the good thing is that it doesn't discriminate. It's everywhere.
it's everywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
And when we think of it in policing, I think about the recruitment in policing is very, very difficult here in the US right now. We have some major political shifts and challenges that are making recruitment of our police officers and recruitment of our law enforcement professionals who are not officers but work behind the scenes in analytics. It often makes recruitment quite difficult. And so we have a push in law enforcement now to really open our eyes to different kind of recruitment efforts, and then once folks are in, we find that they're often moving to another police department, so there's this turnover that's occurring. And so I see in the world of law enforcement that we're starting to rethink how we recruit and how we retain individuals. And so part of having you on here today is to help open the eyes of law enforcement leaders to understand how valuable people with these different ways of thinking and processing could really contribute to the field. When you and I had talked, you talked about a lot of individuals who do have autism, ADHD, OCD, tend to be in the fields of engineering or can you help me understand what fields attract individuals with special abilities and why?
Okay. Well, first of all, if you think about autism, those are people who are often really analytical, really logical, great attention to detail. So these are really useful things. Also, being able to see and understand patterns
Mhm.
and spot mistakes.
Patterns,
Uh,
that's our
so-
literal job description, pattern identification.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that could be in the natural world. It can be in computer code. It can be in reading. It can be in all sorts of different things. So if you know that in the UK, 16% of autistic people are in full-time employment and around 16% are in part-time employment.
Mhm.
Most of the people who are not employed want to work,
Mhm.
but people do not give them a chance. They do not understand the talents that they have. As a coach, I'm a specialist coach, coaching neurodivergent people in the workplace. A lot of my autistic clients are in analytics, are in computer coding, in software programming, things like that. What is interesting is that the organizations and services who've gone out of their way to specifically recruit autistic people, people with ADHD, dyslexia, have found it not only financially profitable,
Mhm.
but also because of the different way of thinking, it brings in new insights and innovation.
Mhm.
So intelligence agencies in the
Mhm.
UK all have staff networks that support neurodivergent people. So
Yeah.
they are one of the bigger employers because of the really specific talents they have. The Mossad, the Israeli Defense Force through the Mossad has a special unit for autistic recruits,
Yep.
really based on the specific abilities. And it goes for all those, specifically ADHD, autism, dyslexia are the main three
Yes.
neurodivergent patients that are being recruited.
Yes.
So it's often a different way of working and thinking that is hugely beneficial. And particularly for autistic people, they often like routine. They often like predictability and
Mhm.
familiarity. So if you have them and you support them, very likely to stay with you.
Yes.
Because why would they go somewhere else if
Yes.
things are good?
Yes. And so I want to pause here because you're talking about a couple of excellent points. So the first point is individuals with autism, let's say, what was it, 80% of them also have ADHD, right? Is that the number that
Yeah, up to
up
80%.
to
Yeah.
80%? So, so people see these folks, the public, right, sees folks who have autism as socially, challenged, right? Like maybe, it's more difficult for them to communicate or understand cues that, a traditional thinker might grasp relatively easily, right? And so we see that and we focus on that. But what you're really saying is, okay, so where there's not, there is, right? So let's look at where there's the is, and that analytical piece, that finding patterns and trends, that is literally the job description of detectives and analysts. So we have to dig deep and be focused and find the pattern and connect the cases. And so you're saying that this particular brain wiring actually functions best as these individuals, right? As this way of service.
It's called an autistic deep dive. So often when an autistic person really is very interested in something and really passionate about it, they do just like a whale, a really autistic deep dive into the material,
Yes.
and they are really focused on that long term. They're not going to
Yes.
be bored after 5 minutes. They can go and be interested in it for years. So
Yes.
actually, that's a really jolly good thing when you're thinking about research and deep analysis.
Yep.
You know, it is what people love doing. And also, maybe if you think about social awkwardness or maybe not wanting to interact with people, well, that's really good for concentration, right? Do
Yes.
you want people chit-chatting the whole way? Would you rather they are completely focused on what they're doing?
Exactly. And so I've noticed too, the analysts that I support with my coaching, I've noticed that they and the leaders really, there's simple accommodations that can
Yeah,
be made to really maximize the things that they're great at. I give an example. I went into a real-time event center, and this agency, it had almost 1,500 officers, and the agency was building out a real-time event center, which is something that a lot of police agencies are doing right now. We want real-time data up, a bunch of screens, so that we can look at this camera, look at that camera, and just know everything that's going on. And this one analyst was having a very difficult time being moved. Like, he was told, this is where you're going to work now, and he says, no, no, I'm not happy. This is, and they couldn't understand why he wasn't happy. He was given this wonderful opportunity to dig more into analysis. And when they asked the right questions, they started to realize that those screens were a distraction to him, and it was a simple solution of just turning his chair around.
yeah,
And when the buzzer went off, like, so when there's a robbery in progress or a murder or something, like, you have like the lights and everything going off, that was a major, major interruption in his thinking. And so he said, is there a way I can just face the wall and wear some ear canceling or
yeah.
noise canceling?
Noise cancelling headphones. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And then people leave me alone when I'm working, unless it's an emergency, like, stop interrupting me, right? And so
yeah.
they made those accommodations, and he literally is the most brilliant person there. He writes SQL, he extracts data and knows how to like write this coding stuff that is excellent. So what accommodations, or I don't even want to call them accommodations, like what strategies can a police agency
I call them adaptations.
adaptations? Okay.
We wouldn't think anything about it if someone was in a wheelchair,
Hmm.
was working as an analyst, and you said, well, obviously we have a wheelchair ramp, we have a lift, make sure we have an accessible toilet,
Hmm.
you can adjust the height of your desk.
Hmm.
Nobody would even question that. Well, I hope they wouldn't anyway,
Right,
right?
right, right.
But if you think about neurodivergent people, well, you can use the same approach and think to that individual. You can't say, oh, all people with autism must face the wall, because we're all individuals, we're all different. So
Yes.
it's about thinking, working with that person. They may
Mhm,
know themselves, well, actually at home, I
mhm.
concentrate, I do this and that. Well, can we replicate that? What
Exactly.
makes it work for you? And that's what you need to think about. And that be different for everyone.
Mhm.
but it's about having that communication. The minute you make that adaptation, somebody will also feel appreciated and respected. Is less
Exactly.
likely to leave because
Mhm.
they feel supported.
That's exactly right. And I like that you talked about the diversity of this because it's not a one and undone, right? And so when somebody, because there might be other analysts who thrive with all of the activity, right? Because they might, that might be their thing. And so, what I'm hearing you say really is the supervisors, the leaders must communicate with all individuals and say, how can the question, right? Like, how can we make it so that you are optimized? What can we do to provide you with the tools you need to be optimized? I work with some analysts who are so afraid of public speaking, and I work with others who thrive in it. And you know,
Definitely.
we don't have to make everybody do everything. We really can focus in on what folks are really good at. And you're right. When we do that, when we focus on that, we retain wonderful folks because we're all working together in a way that provides a value to the bigger team in that larger perspective.
I
And
think as a coach, you'll know as well, the concept of working at your best is
mhm,
crucial. If you can identify what supports you in working at your best, you're on to a winner. But for some people, it's, having a fidget toy they can play
yes,
with, noise
yes,
cancelling headphones. For some people, it's, I want to see a plant when I'm working,
yep,
you
yep,
know.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
none of these things are so simple, and most of them don't even cost money. But things like uh, you know, coaching, specialist coaching for neurodivergent people to help them develop strategies
Mhm.
to support them can be hugely effective as well.
You brought up this coaching thing. I want to sit on this for a second because years ago, I never hired a coach. Like I just didn't have coaches. I didn't, I'm like, I can do this on my own kind of thing. And I'm educated, all the things, right? And then I finally hired my first coach and I almost died on how much it cost, right? And I was like, no, I can't do this. I can't spend money. I'm a mom, all the things. But once I saw that person could guide me through to the other side, I was blown away with what centered, focused coaching can do. And so I've sought out other coaching in different areas of my life, right? And at this point, probably will never live without a coach. Whatever goals I want to reach them faster. So give me a coach, right? And so when you talk about your coaching individuals, I think this is a critical moment to really pause and share that seeking out a coach, seeking out assistance to figure all of this out is really beneficial to your long term success. So, even if a staff member, even if your job does not do this for you, you as an individual, if you're listening to this, if you're pausing with us for a moment, you as an individual deserve to show up as your best self. And so understanding how that can happen is really important. And I love that Tanya specifically helps individuals with special abilities to reach their highest potential. I think that's just wonderful. So if this is the language, if you're listening to this and you're like, why did this video come or why did this audio come up, there's a reason why. And maybe this is your moment to call someone like Tanya and say, I want to optimize. Can you help me walk through that? And so I just wanted to invite you to reach out to Tanya or another coach that suits you, and and recognize that you deserve the most excellent life. You deserve to rise up to your highest and best self. And I love coaching, and I love being a coach. I love receiving coaching. I think it just really optimizes our lives in a way that's indescribable until you've actually done it.
I think it's important to remember that CEOs of companies, right, they
Mhm.
normally have several mentors and several coaches
Yes,
all at the same time
that's
for
right.
different purposes.
That's
And I
right.
love that. It's like they really, really, truly invest in being their best self, and they have they're just tools in their
Absolutely.
toolkit to support them, and that's crucial. But when you're thinking about attracting neurodivergent talent, you have to think when you're thinking about recruitment, also the type of wording you use. So
What a good point.
making
Yes.
it making it inclusive,
Hmm.
because in the UK they often have this standard, "Oh, we welcome applications from, blah blah blah," but actually it doesn't say, um, you know, if you proactively offer, for instance, reasonable adjustments in an interview,
Yeah.
or the simple things like that. It can be, for instance, in an interview that you say, you can have the questions beforehand. We want you to present yourself at your best. If it supports you to have the interview questions beforehand, great, no problem at all. Or maybe
Yes.
even if it's the day before, half an hour before, allow for extra processing time.
Yeah.
Ask specific questions. Don't say, tell us a bit about yourself. That means nothing.
Hmm.
Be
Hmm.
specific about,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your educational qualifications now. You know what's coming then. You can be specific. So it's
Mhm.
all sorts of really simple adjustments you can make to attract people and also to support them through that whole recruitment process.
You're literally like gold is like erupting from the volcano right now because because leaders, this message right now is for you, right? So in policing, we often try to catch people in a lie. We do lie detecting tests prior to hire, right? And so, um, I'm working with some individuals right now who have taken some of these tests and they get so nervous and so overwhelmed in an extraordinary way, one that's not typical, right? And so you shared, something special, which was be aware that you're essentially turning people off, wonderful contributors, potential wonderful contributors, from being employed by the agency by asking questions in a way that doesn't support their neurodivergence, right? And so when you're saying, and maybe that language is a little like funky, but when you're saying tell me about yourself, if somebody asks me tell me about yourself, well, I've been trained. I've gone to business school. I've been trained to not start with the business, to start with myself as a human, and all the things, right? Well, I love getting upside down on a paddleboard or whatever it might be, right? And but when you're saying that question to somebody who doesn't think in that abstract, doesn't think along those lines, because they are thinking along other beautiful lines that would contribute to the agency in a different way, saying something in the leaders shifting their language to be a little bit more direct and saying, Tanya, tell me, what was your greatest achievement in college? Or what was your greatest research project? Like something very direct gets the real Tanya and the real person applying for the position, the real person out versus tripping them up on some of the language that we do here in law enforcement.
I think, yeah, absolutely. And particularly when you talk about autistic people, they tend to be really honest and really direct. So be a
Mhm.
little bit careful about the questions you ask. I was once asked what I thought of a company's website. It wasn't very good, and I
Mhm.
wasn't scared to share that either.
Mhm.
The person who asked me the question was the person who had written the website. I didn't get a job. So, be a little bit careful, but also be prepared to have a different body language going on. So
Mhm.
you're not only talking about maybe extra processing time, and I always call that quality time for quality responses. If somebody is processing it, takes a bit longer, that normally thinks they're gonna come up with a much better answer if you
Mhm.
give them the chance. And say that, it's fine. Take as long as you like and mean that. But
Mm.
also, autistic people may sometimes have difficulty initiating and maintaining eye contact. Are you going to judge somebody for not looking at you, or maybe feeling
Yes.
anxious and moving around,
Mhm.
bringing in a fidget toy? Are you going to judge somebody on that? Well, I always say, brilliant. It means you're concentrating. You're doing something with your hands. When
Yes.
you've got
Yep.
ADHD, people will often do something, fiddle around with a pen, or that's great. That means they are actually focusing. So
Mhm.
it's understanding a little bit about conditions to understand how someone may respond. Somebody with ADHD may be quite easily going down what we call a rabbit hole. They might
Mhm.
actually go down a rabbit hole, come out with all sorts of wonderful links that you might not necessarily see the point of, but they actually are somehow. And they pop up somewhere completely different, probably forgotten what you asked them. And you'd be
Yes.
like, happened? If you understand that, and there's
Yes.
little techniques you can encourage somebody to do right there and then to help them come back to what you actually asked. It's understanding a little bit goes
Yes.
a really long way, because to lose out on those talents, it's ludicrous.
It really, really is. And and it's not like you can go to an interview, Tanya, and say, are you autistic? Or are you instead, as leaders, you have to just be reading people differently, reading people and understanding whatever they're labeled or not labeled, right? Reading people in a way that's much more open-minded, and that you can see the flow being a little bit better. We have our detectives who are trained in body language analysis, right? And so the ones who are trained in an excellent way, really say, well, they were fidgety, but, like, is that their personality, or is that because they were nervous, right? Nervous about the case at hand. And so we're seeing now, I was with a bunch of detectives the other day sharing, some of these the key characteristics that you shared with me of why those specific characteristics make great detectives. And one says, yes, I have a thing with numbers. That's me. I'm a great detective because I memorize all these numbers, and the other
Yeah.
detective had he's like, oh, well, this explains me. He's very capable of having multiple things go on at the same time. Whereas
Mm.
others are like, focus on one thing. But he says,
One
I'm
thing
very,
only. Yeah,
but yes, ma'am. Yep. He says,
yeah, it is. Yeah, I think. See, now this is my ADHD brain is gone again. I'll come back in a minute.
Yep.
Oh no, that's it. Sensory. Yeah, there we are. What's really important to think about in an interview as well is the sensory environment. People can be
Mhm.
hypersensitive. And
Yeah.
when I say hypersensitive, I'm talking about people being able to hear electric in the wall, hearing their own blood rushing through their bodies, being
Mhm.
able to tell whether you smoked a cigarette 3 days ago. That
Mhm.
kind of sensitivity is somebody being fidgety or uncomfortable or anxious
Mhm.
because of one of those environmental factors. Can you proactively actually think about that in
Mhm.
terms of recruitment, but also saying, if you invite someone for interview, is there something, that we can do to support you? Do you require
Yes.
low lighting? Do you
Mhm.
want the window opened, closed, or whatever it is?
Yes.
Actually make it easy for somebody to say, well, actually, I really get a headache when there's bright lights. If we could have it down a bit, that'd be great. If you
Yes.
reduce
Yes.
anxiety, you improve in performance.
Yes. So you mentioned something that just triggered me into thinking something you said. Oh, they smelled a cigarette that you smoked three days ago. What's that all about? What's that piece of it?
Hypersensitivity to smell.
Interesting. Interesting.
I sat in a crowded room last night, the first time since before COVID. 200 people in a room, and I went like, "Oh, you've just had a drink. You've just had a takeaway. You've just been smoking. You have been smoking." Or sensory hell, and I was like, ugh, trying to listen to a talk, being so aware of all the smells around me, as well as all the noises and the flickering light over there.
Yes. Yes.
It was everything everywhere. It was sensory hell. It really was. And a lot of people have sensory processing
Yes.
challenges when they're neurodivergent. Being aware of that
Mhm.
means you can do something about it and really support a person.
So this is
And
hitting me on a
it's
personal
not
level.
difficult.
This is hitting me on a personal level, Tanya, and I'll share with you and apparently everybody here. My mom used to say, so I have this real keen sense of smell. And my mom would smoke cigarettes when I was younger. And then when she was older, I would say, Mom, she would say to me, Dawn, you used to smell if somebody was smoking a cigarette down the street, you would say, I got to get out of here. And
Yeah,
now And now I can tell people if they're getting sick by the smell of them. So I remember smelling my daughter and I'm like, you're getting sick, something's wrong. And it's like kind of in this area. And it's that's so that's so I don't know. I don't know what that means, but
We can do some screening, Dom. That's fine. We'll do it off air then.
well, Tanya, you have given so many great tools today for me personally, but also for our leaders who could really open their eyes to very specific things that they could do. As well as individuals who feel like they're in deficit when in fact they're in abundance. You were on our call the other day, and they were with our private team, and there were so many people there that really felt connected to what you were saying because they always thought that something was wrong with them. And then you come along and share with them, no, this is right about you. And you just have to learn how to optimize it. So you've given me and leaders and my team, and hopefully many people who are listening to this, some very clear tools to really rethink what they think about abilities and to optimize theirs and other abilities. And we'll have your contact information in the show notes so that should anyone desire to reach out to you for one-on-one consulting or mentorship or coaching, or if an agency wants to coordinate with you to how to better prepare themselves for inviting and recruiting and retaining, all of Tanya's information will be below so that you all can access her directly. And, for those of you who want to expand your data-driven strategies in analytics, who want to build your leaders, right, and build the structural design of your police analytical function, as well as the analysts themselves rather, feel free to reach out to me directly. We have our analyst school and our leadership school that can support them and can support your agency in that. So Tanya, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you so much for providing insight and value and taking what has been real in your own life and delivering your gifts to thousands of people now, hundreds of thousands of people, in a way that is incredibly valuable. Really, really appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been really good fun meeting you and working with you, and long may it continue.
Fantastic.